Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islamic Finance program where we are discussing Islamic principles regarding money and wealth and finance, economy and all of these other aspects of business. Inshallah, today we are going to continue from our previous discussion regarding the finance related issues. If you remember, last time we were discussing about some of the higher aims or maqasid of Sharia. Now before we start today's session, I have one small exercise for you. I want you to, in about 20 seconds or so, draw me something on a piece of paper. So people at home, they might join us as well. If you have a piece of paper and a pen, and we're not going to draw anything controversial, nothing, very easy, simple. But there is a lesson that I want to highlight from this exercise. So, you ready? Ready?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Yes. Draw me a tree.
A tree.
Just tree. Don't worry, it's not fail or pass exercise. You know. And if you are at home doing this, you can also draw a tree or think about tree that you are. You would draw if you had a pen and paper. Now, whatever sort of tree you draw, it's going to be, don't trust me, no problem with me, you know. I'm not big on art anyway, so. So how does that sound? Okay, so these are some, all right. Okay, you all finished? All right.
Yeah.
Can you show these, what you're drawing to each other? Like show to your friend across you. No, lift it up. Lift it up. Okay. And this is a tree. Okay. All right. So this is a tree. This is a tree. Can you? What do you notice amongst all of these trees?
Different.
It is different.
Yes. All trees are different.
Yes.
Okay. What is the different about them? What is the different?
The shape.
Shape.
The
Yeah.
form.
The feature.
Yeah. Features.
Yeah.
All right. Anything that is similar in all of them?
They're all trees.
All trees, okay. So if I were just, you know, to draw a tree, you know, like what you were doing, you know, I don't know, something, you know, something like this tree, I don't know. So all of them, maybe a few more branches here and there, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Now, this is a question I want to ask. How many of you here, or people at home, how many of you actually put the roots to this tree? How many of you?
Me.
Okay, let me see. All right, so there is one thing, one line going, so that's a root. Yeah, all right. So most of you did not include the roots.
Yeah. Correct.
All right. Why is that? Why didn't you put the roots? Is this part of the tree?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So why you didn't? Is it an important part?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So why didn't you draw that?
It's something that you don't usually see.
You don't usually see.
Yeah. Visible.
Invisible. Okay. So how many other things in your life that are invisible you don't just notice because they are not there, or you don't pay attention, or you don't do something about these things? Are there some other aspects of life,
Yes.
just because they are invisible, you tend to ignore them a little bit?
There are. Yes.
There's many of these
Many.
things.
Yeah.
Many things. Yeah.
Many of these things. Now, when you think about it, how would this tree get food, water, everything, nutrition, everything? So this is a fundamental thing for this tree. Yet we so easily we don't see it. And this is how it is similar with the money and the society and the economy and social order and the health. So when we are talking about Sharia as a set of rules, Sharia puts certain prohibitions and recommendations so on in order to protect entire system. It just doesn't protect the fruit. Okay, so how do we protect this apple here? You know, oh yeah, just keep eye on the apple. You have to start
From the root.
you know, as they say, from the root to the fruit.
Yeah.
Okay, so work your way up. So we were last time discussing about some of these maqasid or aims of the Sharia, and we say Sharia is trying to protect certain aspects in life. And we said, who remembers what are some of the aims of Sharia, what it's trying to protect?
You said like
Religion.
protecting the family, religion,
Religion,
Family,
family,
religion,
wealth.
wealth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
transactions basically.
Yep.
your-
So we have, in general, so we have religion or deen, life, family, progeny, intellect, and wealth. So these are 5 key sort of areas. Now, when you talk about protecting the wealth as an individual in your transaction and avoiding things, also that can translate at a state level. What would that at the state level look like, protecting the wealth? Protecting economy.
economy. Yes.
Economic
Yeah.
system, yeah.
Yes.
Which is fairly important. Fairly important. As we said before, we were quoting Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, who said that one of the key jobs that we have as Muslims in a society is to protect social order. And this is how you establish Islam, through this organized social order where, you know, we work together and so on. Now, preserving economic system is a very important aspect of preserving that social order and therefore establishing yourself. And in fact, we see many times when there is social disorder, society breaks in chaos. Okay. So Sharia then tries to protect these harm coming and defending wealth, and more specifically attached to the wealth is the whole system, how we manage the wealth and economy and so on. So for example, when you talk about then actions in Islam, they come under 2 broad categories. Anyone can think of what I'm talking about? What are some of the categories? You know it for sure, just
Yeah.
maybe it didn't click. So 2 basic categories. One is dealing between us, and one is types of action of worship. Okay, what do we call them?
We call it ibadat and mu'amalat.
That's right,
Yeah.
ibadat and muamalat. Okay, so they are classified by scholars, action of man, into these 2 broad categories. All right? So now, if you look at ibadat, we usually translate as acts of worship. Okay. So from usul fiqh, what do we know about ibadat? What are some characteristics that we know about acts of worship?
We know that in acts of worship, and that they have already been basically it has already been mentioned to us,
Mhm.
and it was already been ordained to us,
Yes?
the acts of worship.
Yes? And can we innovate in these acts of worship?
No,
No.
we cannot innovate.
So if we have this ibadat here, from usul fiqh we know any kind of innovation here is not something that we want to see,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because they are very prescriptive. So you do this specifically this way, like when you go to doctor. You take the tablet every night at 8 o'clock for 7 days. You don't go start playing, you know. What about if I take it at 7 o'clock, 8 days? You know, you don't do these things.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't mix up.
Yes.
It's very prescriptive. So any kind of innovation here, we don't like to see. Because now you are legislating something that is part of your deen, your religion. Okay, it's a part of worship. Okay, so this would be classified as innovation. Okay, how about other types of actions?
Mu'amalat.
Which is
What are they?
Mu'amalat.
Mu'amalat,
Mu'amalat.
okay? So these are actions between people. Okay, so give me an example of this. Anybody?
Buying and selling,
Buying and selling,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
Buying and selling, what else?
borrowing.
Borrowing, okay, so all of these business.
all this
Yeah.
business.
What about politics, for example?
Yes.
Politics
Yeah.
also falls.
All right.
Politics, because it's
What-
man-made rules. And
What about
Manners
of course,
and
we
stuff.
have certain rules that are you can't play with them,
yeah.
and there are certain things that we have freedom.
Mhm.
You know, like for example in media. Let's say, can we have a media? Is there something specific rule how we do media, how we do these programs?
There is the way we do media and programs is basically scholars would refer it back into the books of fiqh and see if
Yeah.
they can.
So, for example, format of this program that we have, four of you sit this way. We are free to decide, isn't it?
yes, we are free to decide.
How do we run a school or university?
Yeah.
How do we manage certain things?
Yes.
All right. So there are certain things, of course, we are in muamalat following to see first usually prohibition.
Yes.
Okay? So when we talk about finance, politics, media, management, so what are we looking? We don't want to go against something that is established by Sharia to be a prohibition, border. Okay, so in muamalat, in fact, it's like a sport where you have a clear edges. Okay? Now, you are free to play the game inside this field as long as you don't cross these lines. Okay, and engage in certain activities that Sharia says you can't do. So opposite, you see how it is opposite. So here, innovating here is okay. As long you observe prohibitions in Sharia and you keep in mind aims of Sharia. Because you could, for example, sometimes keep prohibitions in line, but it goes against the aims. Okay, so sometimes you'll see later when we discuss, sometimes these banks, they might have like a little trick, that they do. On the surface looks like it's fine, but when you look deep, you see it's not as it looks like in the surface. Like what we say, there's a bail-ina transaction, repurchase. I sell you something and buy it back from you. Some of these credit cards run on these things. Now, as scholars say, this is hidden riba, for example. But when you look at the contract, you say, well, nothing's happening that is wrong if you separate them. Two transactions, but join them together and you have a result that we will talk about it later that is not according to Sharia. Okay, so here in muamalat, for example, one of the muamalat is cooking, isn't it? Yes. There is no rules in Sharia how to cook. It gives you the freedom. You cook as you like. These are the foods you can't touch. These are the things you can't do. So prohibitions are there. How you now cook? It's up to you. Put this together, that together. I have a friend, and I usually tell this story. Like he likes to put strawberries and chili together. Anyone likes that?
And that's up to him.
So Sharia doesn't say don't do these things. Now I don't want to eat it. I don't want to even touch it. Okay, I don't understand it. But Sharia doesn't say don't do it. If you like, you do it. Okay, so this is how muamalat. In general, a rule is that it is allowed to do something unless there is a reason to prohibit. Like, for example, mobile phone. It is allowed unless we can prove there is some damaging effects. Okay? So Islamic finance sits under muamalat, meaning that any kind of contract transaction we are free. Like in a soccer game, you are free to have a strategy how to do it, as long as this contract doesn't violate some of the principles that Sharia puts. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ told us that what is lawful, as you know, is clear, and also unlawful things are clear. However, between these are certain matters that are known, but to very few people. So they are not completely unknown, but there are areas that require more specialized approach. And most Muslims sometimes don't have this understanding. And I would think that finance is one of these areas. Unless it is a simple transaction, you really need to give it some thought. Okay. Now, one of the key differences when we talk about Islamic finance and conventional finance is how do we treat money and what sort of trade we do versus just borrowing money on interest. Okay. Now, to understand and appreciate this trade-based or entrepreneurial type of financing, one has to look at the basic contract in Islam. What is the contract? How does contract work? What are some of the elements? Because we'll be buying and selling things, exchanging. For instance, what is the sale, if I ask you? What is the sale? What happens when I sell something?
It's somebody trading one thing for another.
Somebody trading one thing for another. So I have this, you have $100.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is an exchange taking place.
Exchange taking place. Exchange of what?
Of an item for
Item. What do we mean by item?
which has benefit in it.
It has a benefit. So on the market, exchange is taking place of things, as you say, benefit, and what is being swapped?
Something which has benefit also in it.
Belongings, or we say ownership is being
Ownership.
transferred. So on the market, when you have a sale contract, when you execute the sale, ownership of goods is transferred. So I'm owner of this, you are owner of $100. Okay, now I transfer the ownership of this to you, you transfer ownership of that to me. Okay, so this is, now the contract governs these transactions. Okay, now, any of you study contracts or anything related? We know from Islam that we are supposed to fulfill all the contracts, isn't it? So this is a part of the nature of what we do. Now, what is the contract? When you think about it, what is the contract?
Agreement.
Agreement? What sort of agreement?
Financial agreement?
Transfer agreement?
Yes.
Okay. So what happens in the contract? Like we have a contract that I'm selling you this, and you maybe pay me tomorrow.
Yeah.
So what is the result of this contract?
It proves the ownership.
Prove the ownership.
And proves it shows that there was a transaction that took place.
And what if I don't want to give you tomorrow this $100?
Then using that contract, I may claim my right again.
You can claim your right. So there is some legal aspect in this contract which makes it enforceable. So if I go to the judge and I say, Mr. Judge, we have this agreement, and this contract is binding just on me or on you, on both of us. So it's bilateral or multilateral, more agreement that shows legally enforceable rule regarding what we are buying and selling. Okay, so in Arabic, what is the Arabic word for a contract? Do you remember?
Aqd.
Aqd. Yes.
Yeah.
What is the meaning of this word aqd in Arabic?
It's like a trust contract.
Hmm?
You know.
How do we call our beliefs?
We say faith.
Faith? Aqidah? Okay. So inshallah, after this break, we will continue inshallah talking about Islamic contracts.
Life is a journey, beginning with a single step. The direction is clear. But it still needs guidance.
I stand before you with an attentive heart. Erase my sins from the present and past.
Huda GPS.
Oh Lord, to you I pray, bow down, prostrate.
Welcome back. We are talking about Islamic finance and Islamic law of contract today. Just before a break, we were discussing about the word contract, what it means, and we say it's come from the word aqd, which any one of you know what that word means in Arabic?
Maybe it means something that binds something other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Anyone else?
To bind two things together, to join them. You know.
To join them. That's exactly right. So it bounding two things together, and this is why when we are tying something and we make a knot, you get these two things as one almost. Okay. In terms of a contract as a legal document, what is it that we are tying or putting together? What we are doing? Who are we putting together? What we are putting together?
We're putting an agreement together.
Agreement? And what do we bind with this agreement?
binding two
Ownership.
parties to hold up.
Two
to the-
parties?
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
Ownership.
Ownership, okay. So the product,
The
meaning
product
the,
itself,
the what we are buying and selling, for example. And all, for example, what else? What else? So we bind all of these things in a contract, and we will see what are the parties in the contract. We bind them together in a way that is legally binding,
Yes.
that is legally enforceable,
Yes.
which is different from a promise, for example. What? Like, what is the promise when you think about as a promise? Is it the same like a contract?
No. No.
So is promise binding, or it's a moral obligation, for example?
It's a moral obligation.
It's a moral obligation. So usually when I promise that I'm going to do something, provide you lunch or something like that, it's a moral obligation. Can I take you in court? Oh, he promised he's going to give me the lunch and now compensation, okay?
No.
So this classically promise is something that is a moral obligation. You know. Now when it comes to the area of commercial transaction, when it comes to some liability, for example, I say I'm going to give you, for example, $50,000 worth of inventory if you move to Cairo and open the shop and all of that. Now a person moves to Cairo, open the shop, and then I say, you know what, sorry, I don't have inventory for you. It was a promise, so it's illegal. Well, how do we resolve this situation?
By, first of all, with the promise, making a contract of that promise. So basically, so that if he goes back, then you legally have documents to prove that you were promised and you can take action on that.
So this is where some difference of opinion between the scholars, where some say that, yeah, you can enforce if there is some cost on you and things like that, and some say it's still moral. So there's some difference of opinion in these matters. Now, when it comes to today, to the finance and banking, when bank, for example, acquire some assets to buy and sell and you promise to buy, again, what we see is that many of the scholars would say that it is kind of moral obligation, but it can be, if you expose me to certain costs, you might be also liable for that. All right. However, we say that this promise in reality is what we call a unilateral arrangement, where it is binding only on one person, like the contract is binding on two parties. Promise is actually binding only on one. You have to deliver that one. Okay. So let's look at the some of the common elements of the contract. All right, let's look at the basic sale. All right, let's say I want to, I have two people, for example. Okay, so these are two people, and they are buying the car. Okay. Okay. Okay, so one person is giving car, and another person is giving money. All right, so how much money? I don't know, 10,000. Okay, so we have a contract here to purchase a car. Okay, so what are the common elements in this contract? Who do we see as, you remember we said contract binds somebody together in a legal relation. And let's say maybe, so this is A, party A and B. Okay? So what do we have in this contract? What are the elements of this contract? How do we execute the sale? So number one, who do we have?
Party A.
Party A and party B. So that's first. We could have more parties in the contract, but let's say we have two parties, buyer and a seller.
And a seller.
Okay. What else you see in the contract?
The product.
Product. Okay. Product is the car.
Yes.
It's what's being bought or sold. In a commercial law, we call this subject matter. Subject matter. Okay. So something that is object of a sale. Okay. What else?
We see the item, the money.
Money. This is what we call consideration or payment. Okay, so we see the payment. What else is that we see in the contract? How do we actually start this? So I have a car. You have it. Do we have to do something to start this?
Well, advertising.
Okay, that's good, but like that's a marketing. Now it's another class.
We agree.
But when we come together, you come to the shop,
We have to trade.
we have to trade. How do we trade? How do we start that?
For example, I propose
You propose. And what do you, how you propose it? You give a offer.
an offer.
Offer. I want to buy your car.
Yes.
And what the other person is doing?
Accept or
Accept. Accept.
Mhm.
Okay? So offer and acceptance is a part of Islamically valid contract. You have to have offer and acceptance.
Yes.
I offer this and you accept it. And there is another element in this in a valid contract. There are other smaller elements here and there, but I'm talking about major ones. And there is another one anybody can think of? When we buy and sell and do this, it has to be in
in a place
Document.
In the paper.
in a one sitting
in a
or
one
majlis
setting.
or
Yes.
gathering.
Yes.
What that means is that if we negotiate the price and I give a offer and you give acceptance to a certain price, unless we specify it's done in this gathering, it's not a full sale. So if I walk away or something like that, sale must be completed in one
Something.
meeting, okay, for it to be valid. Otherwise, if you walk away, we didn't complete it, there is some uncertainty what is going on, okay? So we say contracting parties, of course, anything that you would normally think about contracting parties, that they must be sane, you know, capable of entering the contract, mature, and so on. So for example, if I come to you, you know, you are sane, you are mature, and you fulfill the parties. And I say, can you sell me Huda TV? Okay, so you are, everything fine. Can you sell me Huda TV?
No.
You cannot.
No.
So, you know, beside just all of these, you must be person who have authority to sell this,
Ownership.
to transfer this ownership. You just can't go to the guy who works there and, you know, can you sell me this whole company? And he's maybe driver or, you know, he's middle manager, or, you know, he has to be the guy responsible for making this decision. Can't just pick somebody who just fulfills generic terms. Okay? Now, offer, ijab and qabul, offer and acceptance again. So let's say you go to the you know those machines where you put a coin and gives you the Pepsi or chocolate or something like that. How do we do offer and acceptance there? I mean, that machine is not talking to you and say, oh, you know, do you want to, yeah. Where is the offer and acceptance there?
Basically, because of in there it is the product is that is a different type of transaction and
Yep.
this thing.
So we don't have something that is specifically telling us what is the offer. So machine being there, it's offer.
Yes.
You putting the coin and punching the button, it's acceptance.
It's acceptance.
So it's a kind of a valid. So there is no specific way that we do. Sometimes you nod in the market, people shake hand. You know, this is up to the society, how they execute offer and acceptance.
Offer
There is
and
nothing in Sharia
acceptance.
that must be only like this.
Yes.
Must, you know, so there are different ways people go about these things. Subject matter and consideration and unity of majlis. Okay, so we say that offer and acceptance can be conveyed in number of ways. Okay, so any indication, any kind of conduct that we understand, it's offer or acceptance. So it doesn't have to be, okay. So, okay, majlis, we say, the Prophet ﷺ said, the contracting parties have a right or an option to finalize or not until they separate. Okay, so even if we conduct, I say I sell you this for $5 or something like that, until I walk away, I have a right
to accept
to cancel
to
this.
cancel.
I say I changed my mind, forget this. I didn't break the meeting. If I break the meeting, I walk out from this room and we finalized it, it's a done deal. Okay, so it's a done deal. Unless we put option there to rescind this contract, to break it. Okay, so we can put, say, I have a right, for example, to change my mind, let's say 3 days, as we see this being done. Okay, this sometimes they call it like cooling off period, or where you can. So it is sometimes recommended that you have these. Of course, if the product is defective or misleading in any way, you have always right to bring it back, and that is something that is acceptable. Whether it's quantity or quality, you find it's anyway deficient. But you can also put the option there for several days. Subject matter, when we talk about what can we buy and sell Islamically? Can we buy and sell anything? Whatever we want?
No.
No.
No, not anything.
Okay, so when we talk about subject matter, it must be something that exists.
Yes.
You can't sell stuff that does not exist, or something that has some value and a valuable usage. Okay? And also you can own it. You see, it's something must be possessible. You can take it in your possession, and it can be specified. If you sell something that does not exist, it's not something that is a right thing to do under Sharia.
Yes.
Okay, there is only some exceptions in some contracts, which you will see, Salam, for example, where this is allowed for certain goods. But in general, selling things that don't exist is not right. Okay, so they have to be of value, possessible. You can take ownership. So I'll give you an example. Can you sell oxygen?
No.
Air
No.
in this room? I tell you, you know what? See this block of oxygen around here? It's yours.
No, you can't.
Give me $1. Okay, how do I get it now? Where it is? Can I sell it?
No.
No.
Why?
Because it's something which, first of all, you cannot see with the eye, and you can't. It's impossible to.
Yeah.
It's not possible.
How do I take ownership of this?
You don't have
I
ownership.
can't-
of
You
it.
don't have ownership of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about if I put the oxygen in a bottle and I sell it to the hospital? Can I do that?
Yes, because now you have packaged it and you have enclosed it.
Exactly. So I now put the oxygen in a bottle, and it has valuable use. You can take it, you can stock that, and this become now valuable. All right. How about things like copyrights? You know, I make a software, for example, for a company, and I wrote it, code. Can that be subject matter? Can I buy and sell these things?
Yes.
Is it legitimate?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
if it's copyrighted by yourself,
Yeah.
you can.
So any kind of material like that, I can make it like a subject matter. It's something that has a purpose. It has something that I own. It can be specified, identified. I can put a patent. You know, I can do something. That it can be subject matter. Okay. Now, let's see another point. Sometimes when you are taking possession of something, you need to take either physical possession, when you are taking the ownership, or it has to be some sort of constructive. What do we mean by that? Let's say you are selling the house. Now, I cannot bring the house here with me, yeah? And here's the house, and you give me money. Yeah? So we talk about then constructive possession. How do we demonstrate this? By the key. Okay, here's the key. Key of the house. So I'm giving you the key. And as soon as we sign the contract, it's done. All right. Same for the car. And we will talk about some of these rules of the sale. If I sell you and give you the key of the car, to be valid Islamically, you must have uninterrupted access to that car. If it is locked in my garage and I give you the key, but it's in my garage, it's not proper contract. So you must have uninterrupted access to take ownership of it whenever you want. So these are some of the things we'll discuss more in details when we talk about rules of sale and lease and partnership. Okay. Type of transactions. When we look at these types of contracts, so we're talking about buying and selling and so on, there could be 3 basic transactions in this contract, and they are important one because Sharia will put different rules on each of these transactions. So the most basic one is a sale. Okay? We said in a sale, what is happening? Ownership is transferred, which we talk about here. Okay? How about if this was a lease, which is a second type of transaction? If this was a lease, do we what do we do?
This is where we sign a contract. We make an act.
Yeah, we make a contract. However, ownership remains with me.
Ownership remains.
I only transfer some benefit to use that product. So inshallah, after the break, we are going to have a look at the more details regarding Islamic contracts.
I really like the example he gives in that clip
Yeah.
About the guy stuck in traffic. You know, he thinks that it's just, it takes it personal, which you know, brings us to the point that a pessimist is very subjective when it comes to negative things that happens in his life.
But for example, if you are talking to me about doing something good in life and you are on the bed of death, that you want to do something for your ummah. This is why we did this program, to make you get your achievable goals before you reach the moment that you will not be able to achieve anything.
SubhanAllah, if I may add, if I have a positive attitude and if I have courage, why it doesn't appear in all the problems that I face? Why it doesn't appear in all what I do in my life? Actually, because you are not responsible enough to control your mindset.
I was reading a study on the New York government. They wanted to improve the crime rate. They wanted to lower the crime rate ultimately. And they found that in the subways there was a lot of graffiti, a lot of trash. And just by doing a little thing, like removing the trash and removing the graffiti and making a more clean environment, the crime rate actually lowered. So this shows the power that how little things can really make a big difference.
Welcome back. In this segment we are talking about Islamic law of contracts, and we are looking at some of the transactions. So just before the break we were discussing about different transaction types. We said number one, the most basic transaction could be one of a sale. Number two, again, could be type of a lease. And we will look at this in more details as we go, but when you compare sale to the lease, in sale you transfer the ownership for some money, while in the lease, what is happening is you transfer something else. Ownership is with you. What you transfer is
some of the benefits.
like what we call manfa'a, like a benefit.
Yeah,
Or
some of
in
the
English they
benefits.
call it usufruct, which is the right to use something. Okay? So this is subject matter, right to use this car for 7 days. Okay, so this is what is transferred. And there is another one, which is the loan. So we have sale, lease, and the loan. Loan is when I give you something temporarily to give me back as it is. Okay? For example, I give you $100. Okay? I give you $100 as a loan. When you give me back $100, okay, after let's say 7 days, it's a like loan. I don't charge you, and in Islam in general, loan is completely different type of transaction. This is always what they call like charitable or benevolent act, like Qard Hasan sort of thing. So in these transactions, we will see that whenever you have a loan, you shouldn't ask for more. Okay? Now, when we talk about riba, you will see something very interesting. And that is, for example, Prophet ﷺ told us when you exchange gold for gold, that it must be on the spot. Okay? And what we are saying now, if I give you ounce of gold, and you give me that ounce of gold back in 7 days, did we exchange it on the spot?
No.
No, we didn't. But we know, authentic narration tells us, whenever you exchange these two things, it must be
on the spot.
Gold for gold must be on the spot. How do we understand? And this is where rules of riba and the contracts are vital to understand. What sort of contract do we have when it is a loan, where one of these rules drops? Otherwise, if we go this just on its face, we would say, I cannot borrow money to anyone. Because always money for money must be on the spot. Okay? But we see this hadith is saying, do not sell gold for gold, which is commercial type of transaction. Exchange, or sarf, or something like that. Different ones. However, when you have a loan, I give you this rule drops. So when we discuss issue of riba, it will be very important to understand different types of contracts and how riba relates to these things. Okay? Now, result of each of these transactions will be different. Okay. Now, we talk about sale and all of these things. Okay, let me now talk about something that is a result of these transactions, and this is categories of ownership. So once you execute the contract and any of these things take place, there are certain categories of ownership that we have to look. So number one, you here, when you start this transaction, you have ownership of assets. Okay, so this is what could result. Or you could have, if this was a deferred sale, for instance, if you went and you said, I'm going to give you my car, and you give me $100,000 or $10,000 in 1 year time. Okay, so I started with owning the asset, which is a car, and then we swap. What did we swap? I gave you the car, and what do you give me?
Money.
You didn't give me still money. We said you give me in 1 year. It's a kind of a credit sale.
It's credit sale.
Yeah?
Yes.
Is it allowed? We'll look at this later on. Is there something of rules of riba that might affect this or something like that? But we say it is allowed, inshallah, in general, unless there is some other problems, okay? Here in the credit sale, now I own debt. I become owner of debt, so you owe me $10,000. Okay, so I exchange ownership of an asset for the ownership of a debt. You owe me this money. And the third one is, if this was a lease, I could have just given you temporarily this manfa benefit, or what we call in English usufruct, right to use this product. Temporarily, I'm transferring this. So these are type of the contract, okay? Now, if a person owns the asset, like a house, okay, he also owns benefit to use the house. However, it's not other way around. Just if I have a benefit of using the house, I'm renting the house, doesn't mean I own the whole house together, yeah? So these are two different things. So let me ask you then one question, okay, about this. Suppose I'm renting house from you. Am I the owner?
No.
No.
Okay, all right. Are you the owner?
Yes.
Okay. Now, who has the full ownership of the house?
We do.
Hmm?
We do.
The owner of the house has the full ownership of the house.
Yeah?
Yes.
Now, this is a little bit trick questions, because when we say full ownership, it means ownership of the asset and ownership of the benefit. So if I'm renting the house from you, I have temporarily right to use it, and you have ownership of the asset. So in fact, none of us has full ownership.
Partial ownership.
Partial. That means that if I'm renting the house from you, you can't just walk into my house, because you transfer this right to me. It is yours as a building, but I have a right. You can't just walk in and say, I just want to come check, how you're doing, if everything is still fine. That doesn't work like that. So now, based on this contract and executing the sale and so on, we could have different outcomes of this transaction. So what are the outcomes? Either it's okay or not. So we are transacting something, we understand what you can buy, what you can sell, who has which ownership, all of these things. Why are we discussing these things? Why are we discussing all of these things? Because we say trade and riba are two different things, isn't it? That is what people you will see later argued before. They say, isn't this riba and your trade same thing? You see, in riba you just change money for money. But if you want to do trade, then you have to know something about real stuff, real life, assets, contracts, transactions, ownership. And at the end, is this a valid or not? So when you execute a transaction, it will come to the basic two components. Either this is valid contract or this is not valid contract. Okay, so this is majority of the school of thought divided like that. Hanafi school of thought put another mid kind of what do you call, like on the pause, which is voidable contract. It's between. It's missing some aspects. Okay, so different school of thought give different thing. So I will look at all of them. So valid contract, Sahih contract, is one where we see all of the elements in this contract are found to be in order. Okay, so all of these elements that we look are found to be in order. Voidable, this is what we said from Hanafi school of thought, that they put this, and that does make sense to have this. Is a type of contract where some non-essential element is missing. For example, I buy a car, like we said here, but I maybe did not specify something like color of the car. Mm. So it has all elements of the contract. There is no riba, there is no problems, there is nothing like that. But some non-essential part is missing. So we say this is like contract on pause. You have to remove this so to become fully valid contract. And of course, if there is any part of the contract that has a major, like haram, you're buying and selling something that is not allowed, like alcohol or riba or anything like that, then this is batil contract. Doesn't work anything. All right? So result will be the same. And we know, as Prophet told us, that Muslims must keep to the condition they make, except when this condition is something that prohibits lawful or something that is making other way around. So either you are making halal haram or haram halal. So otherwise, if you put a condition, you have to stick with these conditions. So for example, conditions that must be honored as long as they do not breach Sharia. Example, anybody has any example?
It must be, you must be the owner of that item.
All right, but you put in now condition. Let's say, for example, there is a particular narration that both the buyer and the seller retain the option as long as they have not separated and they have given each other the option. So this is narration from Bukhari that Prophet said this. What this means is that both buyer and the seller have this option to cancel the contract until they are separated. Or they give each other the option, what we said before. So this is a valid condition in the contract. Okay? Now, default rule of the sale render the sale complete when the buyer and seller depart. However, they can make condition that after a few days they can change their mind.
Yes.
Okay. Now, okay. So let's see some of these permissible conditions. For example, owner may require that when you purchase something, you give some deposit. So you buy the car from me, and you're going to pay me 10,000 in 1 year. I say that's fine, but I will put a condition that there is some deposit there, like rahan or the guarantee, something that will guarantee me. And you say, okay, I'm going to give you, I don't know, what we give him?
I'll give you my watch.
I give you my watch, okay, I hope it's very expensive one. At least one of these, the brand names. So I give you maybe like a ring or something, okay, like a watch or ring or something. Why do I take this stuff?
That is just a guarantee that you'll stick on your
Yeah. So how do I guarantee that? How do I guarantee
by
that?
taking
If you
something
don't,
which is valuable
yeah.
to him also.
So if you don't give me $10,000, I will sell this.
Yes.
Yeah, I will sell this. Prophet ﷺ bought some barley and he left the shield ﷺ as a collateral. Okay, so this is something that I will use. Should you not? So you could put these certain conditions. Okay, or provide somebody who will guarantee repay in your behalf or something like that. Example in the lease, you know, I'm leasing you this car, and I say, condition of lease is that you will not drive it off-road. I don't want you to go to some jungles, you know, like up and down. No, on the road. Okay, so I put a certain condition. Or if it is the house, I say no pets allowed. Don't put me dog. Don't put me, you know, cats. You know, my daughter loved cats, and I say when I was young, I had a neighbor. She had full house of the cats. I don't want to see the cats ever. So if I have a house, I definitely say no cats allowed. And this is all we had prepared for you today. Inshallah, next time we will discuss and continue these aspects of financial transaction. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.